Welcome to Fort Collins, Colorado, home to Fresno State will kick it off, and we will be underway. Stopped at the 18. The Rams offense will get first crack at it today. They got an incredibly efficient performance from this guy last time out. Now, Jesse, it's about making that a consistent thing.
Yeah, I think the most impressive thing watching that tape back from his last game is the ball never touched the ground, David. It was amazing. And it wasn't that he was so accurate throwing the ball deep down the field. It's just that the ball was always going to the open guy. He did a really good job checking it down, taking the profit when it wasn't open downfield. That kept the offense on schedule. That's really important for this offense today.
And when you're watching it as a defensive player and coming to this football game, man, you know this is going to be a challenge. I better get pressure on this guy. If I let him feel comfortable, you'll see another day like last week. I mean, that dude was accurate. Almost every ball was caught. They were in rhythm. They're going to have to find some creative ways to get him off his spots and make him feel uncomfortable.
He will signal for the fair catch and take it just inside the 35. So Fresno State's offense will take the field for the first time. And Jesse, the man in the backfield today, not necessarily a superstar. They'll just try to have him grind out the tough yards when they need it.
They present themselves, take what the defense gives them, and you cannot turn the ball over.
No, you got to hold on to that rock, but it would be nice. I think this offense would really open up with some more consistency at this spot. Now, a running back they can really depend on. He becomes that guy. If he can grow into that, this offense can take that next step.
Man down on the play as the officials take a break to let him be checked out. Now on first down from the 40. Wide receiver comes in motion. Off the play fake on first down, wants to throw. Quickly to the tight end. Looks as if we have an injury on that last play, and we'll take a break to check him out. Got some of the work done on first. Now let's see what they have on second down. The inside handoff. That is a big win for this defense as they were right there as soon as he got the ball. Trying to move the sticks on third down through the air. Makes the catch. It's Potts. Working their way closer and closer. A third down conversion, and they've got it at the 26. Looking to throw on first down. And it's incomplete. If you're going to take a hit like that, you might as well hang on to the ball. Plenty of work to do here on second and long. From the gun, they'll try to impose their will. Stuffed on back-to-back plays. He got nothing, and now they're looking at third and long. They'll keep it on the ground. This defense makes a play, stopping him well short, and it'll be fourth down from the 24. They'll try to salvage a field goal on this drive. Never a doubt. And that'll put the first points of the game on the board. It's 3-0.
And you want a touchdown and you want to be aggressive, but man, right down the middle, that obviously gives me some confidence down the road that I can trust this guy.
They'll kick it away after putting up a field goal on that last drive. And it'll be a touchback. The ball will come out to the 25-yard line. Colorado State takes over the Ram. Offense returns to the field. They went 3 and out on their first possession. Now to see if they can be more productive this time around. Makes the catch and steps out of bounds, but short of the first down mark. He'll be run out of bounds, but there is a flag on the play. The officials offer the deal, and the coach accepts it. They will take the penalty. Off the play fake on first down to throw. It's complete on the right side. They stop him almost immediately. Short gain there, and still a little ground to cover to pick up the first. Wants to fire on second down. He slings it deep to the left. And it's incomplete after taking a shot on second down. They're scaring it third. From the gun, wants to pass. And the pass is incomplete here on third down, but there is a flag. Let's check it out.
Personal foul. Roughing the passer. Defense.
An ill-advised play by that defender as he makes contact with the quarterback well after the throw, and it'll cost his defense. We'll give him a couple on that one. 2nd and 8 coming up. And he's brought down, but there's a flag on the field. Let's see which way that's going to go.
Hold.
Just an obvious holding call there, and one that just kills an offense's momentum. They'll go to work in the air on 2nd down. And the ball comes out. What a disastrous play. Sometimes the ball just bounces your way, and the offense very lucky to keep possession on that one. On 3rd and long, doesn't need to take the check down. He tosses one high and deep down the left side. And trying to put points on the board on 3rd down. Now they're staring at 4th down. The Rams send out the punt unit. This will be the 2nd time they've had to kick it away. Fields the punt and looking for daylight. Not able to pop the big return, but they've got the ball back and ready to go with a fresh possession. He put it out there for him, and the senior gave him a chance, but they couldn't make the connection. Working well behind the sticks on 2nd down. Working that wide receiver screen. He's brought down quickly. Minimal gain there, still a bit short of the 1st down. The Bulldogs really need to keep this drive alive on 3rd down. Looking to throw for it. Quick strike complete. That'll get the job done and move the chains, and they'll mark the ball at the 45. And the Bulldogs will snap it on 1st and 10. Gonna look downfield again. The Bulldogs have put themselves in dire straits after that last play. It's 2nd and a mile. From the gun, the ground game. And he was fortunate not to lose yardage on that play, able to wedge it back to the line of scrimmage. On 3rd and long, a check down would be the last resort. Still running at the 40. They'll make the stop about a yard short of the 1st down. Here comes the field goal unit as they'll try to get the 3. Splits the uprights. It's good. The lead is 6 in the 1st.
How about it? 50-plus, no problem. Big leg, nice accuracy. That's a big-time kick for this young man.
After putting up a 3-spot, the kickoff unit set to go. And he'll just take a knee, and this drive will start at the 25. We will see what this Colorado State offense can get done this time. They really didn't move the ball at all the last time they had it, and hoping for better fortune this time around. Didn't pick up a lot there, moved it forward just a few. And the Rams want to pick up the tempo. Second down, he'll throw it. Grab near the marker. It's Darnold. At the 45 on his way. Racing to the right. Touchdown, Colorado State. And once he found open space, the band might as well start playing.
This offense is so good. Man, they can hurt you in so many different ways, and they do it so quick, so explosive. They can put small drives together, big drives together. They've really had a great year, and that's why they're a top 10 offense.
Setting up for the extra point that would put them on top. And they move on top with the extra point, 7-6. Let's go to the studio now and check in with Kevin Connors. Kevin, what do you got?
Fellas, it's hit triple zeros in a captivating game today in the American. USF put one in the win column in convincing fashion. The Bulls had zero issue moving the ball, and that defense held strong in key moments. Talk about a complete performance. Never a dull moment when it comes to the American. Back to you guys.
Yeah, how about that? Sounds as if they had a good ball game there. Kevin, thanks for the update. Try to make up for some of that lost ground on second down. Oh, they're after him! And the quarterback goes down at the 11-yard line.
Play-action pass success has a lot to do with selling that fake. You can tell defense was not buying it, got in the backfield, got the big play.
Now a lot of work to do to move the chains, keep this drive alive after that earlier sack.
Well, just a really nice job there on that third down, trying to get after this quarterback. And obviously they're not able to make the play in the backfield, but really nice job pursuing. You see the athleticism and the speed they have, how they play as a unit together. Only giving up a little bit of a gain and now setting up fourth down.
Found a little running room on that one. Picked up some nice blocks before he's run out of bounds. Looking for a physical attack from the gun. And a nice solid pickup there before the defense wrestles him to the ground. Halfway there on first down, it's 2nd and 5. Looking to fire. Snagged in the middle. It's Morton. Makes a grab and knocked down, and he's got it at the 25-yard line.
I don't know if this defense knows what just hit them because they gave up the completion, they gave up a first down, and now here's the offense back up at the line of scrimmage again, going tempo.
He's going to lose a yard on that one. The Rams headed quickly to the line.
Well, the defense didn't have a lot of time to celebrate that last big play because here's the offense right away back at the line of scrimmage, ready to roll again with tempo.
To the air on second down. Makes the grab. And they pick up just a few on that completion. Ball's at the 24. A lot of confidence in their kicker from here, but they'd love to take it off of his foot and convert the first down. Pocket breaking down. Pressure is on the way, and the pressure has arrived, and down he goes at the 30.
That defender is a matchup nightmare for any offensive lineman to block. He's got athleticism, he's got length, he's got flexibility. He put it all on display on that sack.
They've decided to try to go for the field goal here. And this field goal attempt will be a 48-yarder and not straight on from the left side. Absolutely center cut. The lead is now 4 here in the first.
And this guy has been a machine all season long. He is absolutely automatic. You know you're getting 3 points when this guy jogs on the field.
He's brought down at the 16. Would have been much better off to take the touchback. Both teams made no secret they wanted to target their big play receivers, and they've done just that in the first. And they've swapped into the field, and we'll get it going in the second. They've got a first down here to open the period. Leaves it with the back. They'll knock him down for a loss of a couple. Not what they had in mind to start this drive. Here comes 2nd and 13. The play action fake. He's going to throw deep right side. And it slips through his fingers, incomplete. That would have been a huge game if he could have held on. On 3rd and long, he's going to have to turn one loose downfield. It's on target and complete. Gets it out just short of the 20, out of bounds at the 19-yard line, and a little more room to operate. The kick is on its way. Fair catch is brought in at the 43, and they are set up nicely. Guys, we'll have another peek at this Rams offense. They kicked a field goal on the last drive, Jesse. They've got the lead. Breaks into the open. He'll go out of bounds inside the 40. They'll mark it at the 39. Now from the 40, it's 1st and 10.
You know, good running backs are the ones that can make things happen in small spaces. That running back there found his lane. He found his...
Grabs it inside the 10. They'll get him stopped just short of the end zone, but they're in business here with a first down. The big play came, David. He saw that safety and just didn't believe he could get over the top in time.
Exactly right. You see the one safety in the middle of the field, you know the outside part.
Into the end zone he goes. Touchdown, Rams!
This offense is top 10 in the country in points per game because they've got a lot of speed and they've got home run hitters. They score fast. They don't need 10 plays to go down the field. You saw it right there. They've recruited well. They've got playmakers. They're going to be a problem for defenses all year long.
They'll try to add another to their lead. And they add the extra point to finish the drive. Quick strike offense on that three-play scoring drive. Kickoff unit on the field, and this defense will be called on to protect this lead. And it'll be a touchback. The ball will come out to the 25-yard line. Fresno State takes over, and the offense will go back to work. They'll leave it with him. A collision, and he stopped at the 27 after picking up 1. Picked up 2 yards on that last one. They need 8 on second down. He'll pull it on the read. Banging, slithering, whatever it takes to get that ball up to the 32. And the Bulldogs come to the line on 3rd and short, trying to convert here. Wants to throw on 3rd down. Fires to the tight end. It's a game of first downs, and they've got one out to their own 37. Use the play fake, now to throw. Unloads to the wideout. All kinds of room to throw that one in there. This senior shows some serious arm strength firing that one in for the first down. Looking downfield on first down. Fires to the wideout. Catch in the middle, it's Hussein. What a play there, and he rips off a big one all the way to the 16-yard line.
Well, Reese, you and I were talking about this before the game. How is this defense going to be able to deal with all the speed they have offensively? You saw them just rip off a big play.
And, Jesse, now their head's spinning just a little bit. Give up a big chunk play, and it's right back at them. Timeout called by the defense. It's their first of the half as they'll go to the sideline and try to make adjustments. Caught over the middle. It's Hussein. That one takes it down to the 13-yard line. Going to work on second down in the red zone, and still some ground to cover to pick up that first down. Just too much juice on that one as he wants to throw it. Looking to the end zone. And it's caught! Touchdown, Fresno State!
Touchdown, Fresno State. Number 84 with the catch in the end zone.
Getting set for the point after.
Is on for the extra point.
And after the extra point, they're down 4, 17-13. They put together a 74-yard touchdown drive, and they finish it by firing one in from the 13 for the score. From inside the 10, here he comes. Able to find enough room to get it out across the 25. He's brought down at the 26. Colorado State takes over the Ram. Offense returns to the field. From the gun, they'll give it on the inside. It's a fumble on the play. Defense grabs the football, and there he goes.
And there's so much skill to these returns. As soon as you get the football, man, watch the defensive guys turn into blockers and understanding how to follow your blockers. And he did everything right except for get in the end zone. Got it inside the 5-yard line. Now set up the offense for great field position.
That is just what the doctor ordered for any offense. Get a fumble recovery and start your drive 1st and 10. They'll try to get it in with the run. And he'll take this into the end zone, but hang on just a second. Flag down. Let's see what this is about. That is a costly mistake as the penalty wipes the touchdown off the board. Snaps it in the shotgun. Gets it out fast. That completion will take them inside the 10 to the 9-yard line. Defense rolls up deep in its own end on that last play. Now a 2nd and long coming. Back to pass. And it'll be incomplete. This defense is physical in pass deep. This defense was put in a difficult spot, but they've made it tough. And now the offense faces 3rd and goal. Big fella moving. Big fella fighting for every inch, but he will not get there, and it'll be 4th down. And here comes the field goal unit. This kicker has already made a couple today. The official says no good. And guys still down by 4, still needing a touchdown to take the lead.
Well, everybody in the stadium thought that was an automatic 3. Not so fast. Bad miss by the kicker.
We will see what this Colorado State offense can get done this time. This time, they need to take care of the ball and maybe extend this lead, David.
And I think you got to look at the positive reason. You still got the lead. Now take care of the football. Put a nice drive together, Jesse. You don't have to stress. We're still winning.
I feel like they think that player for player, they're the better unit on the field right now. They just got to make more plays.
Brought down at the 31 after a pickup of 10 yards on that one.
And after that long completion for their 1st down, did you see everybody sprinting to the line of scrimmage offensively? They want to go tempo right now.
He is going nowhere. Stop at the line of scrimmage. And the Rams want to crank the tempo. Back to pass on 2nd down. Fired that thing out in a heartbeat, but it's incomplete. Man down on the play as the officials take a break to let him be checked out. Now facing a 3rd and long. From the gun, wants to pass. Wide open downfield. They'll get it to the 48, no need to measure it to 1st down. The Rams are marching down the field.
And it's frustrating as a defense when you give up that 1st down and you give up that pass play. But here we go with this offense. They're right back on the ball. You got to flush that. You got to get lined up, and you got to communicate.
That's caught. It's man. Tackled almost immediately. They're well short of the 1st down. Pulls it on the bootleg fake. Bought a little time. Lets it go. Caught near the sticks. It's Morton. They just gashed the defense on that one, and they've got it down to the 23. And the Rams have it with a 1st and 10.
Stop me when you've heard this before. 1st down. 1st down. 1st down. Just continuing to put 1st downs together. So far, this defense just can't.
Touchdown, Colorado State. A great catch and run for 6. Timing and better execution. That is just what a quarterback and wide receiver need.
And it's timing, it's route running, right? You got to be precise. You got to know exactly what yard you're running to. The quarterback, receiver on the same page. That's why you get the touchdown.
Lining up for the PAT. And the extra point is good. It's 24-13. And let's check in with Kevin Connors in the studio. Kevin?
Guys, back to your game in a moment, but first we have to show you how the script is being written here. Troy is currently trailing in this one, but it feels like the tide may be turning. This program has picked itself up before, and it's capable of it again today. It's a touchdown game. They're trailing by 7 to Vanderbilt. Any big developments in this one, we've got you covered with the best studio team in the business. Gentlemen?
And how about that one? Kevin will be keeping an eye on everything going on elsewhere. Going to swing it on 2nd down. Flips it out on the screen. He's brought down, but he went backwards after that completion, not the way they had it drawn up. We've reached the 2-minute timeout, and a score on this drive would do wonders for their confidence. Not exactly the ideal situation for this offense. 3rd and long, backed up inside their 20. Under fire. And he just throws it away on 3rd down. I don't think you can give up on a play like that. Fresno State will have to punt it away. 3 and out, they got stuck in reverse. They hope the punt can bail them out. Really explosive when he gets his hands on the ball, and he found a couple of crevices and made a nice game before being run out of bounds. The pull and throw off the RPO. Steered out of bounds at about the 36-yard line. A big pickup, and they are threatening. Throws to the wideout. Grabbed over the middle. It's Morton. Makes a grab over the defense, and they are threatening now down at the 15. Looks as if we have an injury on that last play, and we'll take a break to check him out. On 1st and 10, trying to strike from the 15. From the red zone, he's going to throw it. I don't think that's the way they drew it up. Incomplete. Well, will they dial up on 2nd and a long way to go? Going with the counter play here. He's tackled right at the 10-yard line, and they're trying to cash in on this drive. Really need to pick up this conversion and avoid having to settle for the field goal. They'll send the back in motion. On 3rd and long, try to convert through the air. The quick out. Now looks as if they'll settle for the field goal try. Already 1, and that lead grows even bigger.
And 3 more on the board, and this kicker is starting to get a reputation starting off the season. Hasn't missed yet. Nice to have a guy that you can really, really depend on.
And he'll just take a knee, and this drive will start at the 25. Plenty of time left in the half here as they take over, but they will want to be efficient here in the final 2 minutes. Trying to set up the screen. And good coverage by the defense, just a short gain. The hurry up now, 2nd down, clock ticking. Wants to go up top. Looking to the big tight end. Wide open, makes the catch. Shoved out of bounds after a big gain. They'll mark it at the plus 42. Now it's a 1st down from the 43-yard line. Wants to go up top on 1st down. And they dialed up a shot play, but they couldn't make the connection. So now it's 2nd and long. Looking to go up top, and time's running out in the half. The defense wouldn't let him loose there, and it was a completion, but they lost yardage. We got a timeout here late in the 1st half, and they'll try to get more points on the board before the break. Still in the pocket and fires over the middle. He holds it in, and nobody's close. He's brought down, but what a play for this offense, and they'll have it at the 12-yard line. Fresno State back to work with a fresh set of downs. From the gun, leaves it on the inside with the back. And he waltzes in for the score. Touchdown, Bulldogs!
And you're going to need more of this in the 2nd half. That's the way you punctuate a drive at the end of the 1st half to cut this to a 1-possession game. Need more of that physicality in the 2nd half.
Lining up to add another. And it's up and good as they draw just a touch closer. So they got the touchdown, and as they kick off, really important for the defense to shut them down here. Here he comes from inside his own 5. Not a lot of space to be found. Good hustle by the coverage team, and they stop him at the 21. Here we go. They'll try to get something on the board here in the final minute of the 1st half. The screen, he can go. Oh, he's got some space. What a play to get it inside the red zone, and they are set up at the 17. Timeout called by the offense, and now they just have 1 remaining in the half. Now from inside the red zone. Makes the grab. They'll get it down to the 8-yard line on that throw and catch, and the defense is backed up against the wall. Going to take a shot on 2nd and short. It's complete. They will score. Touchdown, Colorado State.
And that's just a fantastic job of executing the 2-minute type situation by this offense. Something you practice all week long for end of half and end of game. Quarterback, really nice job. Good job by the staff, too, getting the plays in quickly so they could get them to the line of scrimmage and get going. And them scoring that touchdown with seconds to go here in the first half, piling onto their lead, that gives them tremendous confidence heading in at halftime.
Lining up to tack one more onto that lead.
Extra point.
And he puts through the extra point. Quick strike offense on that 3-play scoring drive. Kickoff unit on the field, and this defense will be called on to protect this lead.
Fresno State, 20.
And it'll be a touchback. The ball will come out to the 25-yard line. Under a minute to play here in the first half, and the offense will take a knee, and that is how we'll wrap up the first half. That's the end of the second quarter. That means it's time to join Kevin and our halftime update.
All right, guys, looks like we've got a great scene there today in Fort Collins. And this has just been a passing clinic, really, by both offenses. They've effectively stretched these defenses, forcing the secondaries to cover every blade of grass, and they've still racked up big plays. Man or zone, pick your poison, or lay some blame at the feet of those pass rushers who can't do anything against the maulers on that offensive line. And with that, let's send it back to our team at sunny Lubick Field.
The Rams will kick it off to start the second half. And he'll just take a knee, and this drive will start at the 25. Here comes the Fresno State offense onto the field. This is when the pressure can ramp up a little bit on an offense, David, when they start feeling the heat to answer a score.
And I think being down 14, you can kind of feel that way. But, dude, if you put a good drive together, this is a 7-point game. So, Palmer, no need to panic.
I was just going to say, David, I mean, this thing can flip quick. You go down, score, all of a sudden your defense gets a stop, or who knows, better yet, gets a turnover. This game is entirely different.
And they'll spot it at the 38, and that'll be plenty for the first down. They moved the chains on the ground last time. Let's see if they try to hit him up top. Off the play fake on first down. Got it in the middle, it's Silver. And a good job of coverage by that defense, just a short pickup. They'll line up for a second down play.
Brings up second down.
Looking to fire. Grab near the sticks, it's Silver. They make the stop, but there is a flag on the field. We'll see what that's all about.
Personal foul. Roughing the passer. Defense.
They're desperate to do anything they can to try to slow down this guy who's just been spinning bean all day. A little carried away with that roughing penalty. He gets nothing, and they're staying stubborn with this running game, but at some point you're going to have to change your thought process. Caught in the backfield, it's Hussein.
I like the decision by the quarterback here. Just get the ball out of your hands, get it to your playmaker. A lot of times he'll dance and make even bigger plays than he did here, but it was still a positive game.
Got the first down and still on his feet. Fresno State moving it quickly down the field. Coming out on first down with the play fake. That one never had a chance. Incomplete. Man down on the play as the officials take a break to let him be checked out. Plenty of distance between them and the sticks here on second down. He'll do it himself. That's a fumble. And the defense jumps on it. They get that turnover.
Well, the quarterback did everything right in terms of his reads on that option play. He was supposed to keep it, but he's got to do a better job of holding on to the ball. Give the defense credit for getting to him and creating the takeaway.
As we'll have another peek at this Rams offense. They'll start this drive with a pass. Finds the tight end.
As a tight end, if you're going to be good in the passing game, you've got to be able to feel the windows when defenses play zone coverage. And he did a really good job of that right there. He didn't rush. He didn't hurry. He took his time, found the soft spot, and gave his quarterback an easy place to throw the football.
Looks as if we have an injury on that last play, and we'll take a break to check him out. It'll be 1st and 10 from the 30. Quarterback on the keeper. At the 40, there he goes. And the tackle was made, but there has been a flag thrown.
Illegal blocking back. Offense.
A solid gain on that one, and it goes for naught as the penalty will back them up. The give to the running back from the shotgun. Found that space and now on 2nd down. Gets the back moving. 2nd down, they'll go to the air. He misses his man. The accuracy just not what it needed to be on that play. Couldn't find his man last time, and that leaves him with a 3rd and 6. From the gun, wants to pass. He took a hit as he threw it and couldn't deliver the football. It's incomplete, and 4th down's coming. And the Rams will call on their punt team. Fair catch is signaled and made, and they'll go to work from the 27-yard line. Fresno State takes over, and the offense will go back to work. When you're playing from behind, you can't afford to give it up the way they did the last drive, David.
No doubt. You cannot give the football away. Again, turnovers are the biggest stats in winning and losing games. You're behind, Palmer. Take care of the ball, but we got to go get a score here.
Yeah, and they just got to do a better job executing. I like the game plan so far for them, but they just need to go out and do a better job connecting the dots.
Looks as if we have an injury on that last play, and we'll take a break to check him out. Here comes the offense on 1st down. Wants to throw on 1st down. Unloads to the wideout. Catch in the middle, it's Hussein. A quick tackle made, but he's got plenty for the 1st down. Power football with the run. There he goes. They make the stop at the 37, but not before he's got 10 yards and the 1st down. To the air on 1st down. Here comes the heat. Nowhere to go with the ball, and down he goes at the 39.
I tell you what, the offense, they get the big run play, and then what are you thinking? Maybe play action, take a shot. How about the defense? They were ready to roll. Even if they gave up the run, they didn't just play the run. They were ready for the pass and got the big sack.
The Bulldogs trying to find their way forward after the big loss on the last play. 2nd down, they'll go to the air. Pressure coming. And the defense gets loose, bringing the heat, and down he goes again.
And giving up 3 sacks a week ago. Now you've already given up 4 sacks. They got to find a way to protect their quarterback. Give him a little bit more time.
Now a lot of work to do to move the chains, keep this drive alive after that earlier sack. On 3rd and long, hoping to throw beyond the sticks. Here's a heat. And this defense is bringing the heat. Another sack.
And there's no mystery as to why this team's losing today. They've given up 5 sacks. They cannot keep their quarterback upright. And you just saw another example of it right there. He has never been able to get into rhythm throwing the football.
Fresno State will have to punt. Wouldn't call it a shank, but I don't think he'll include it on his greatest hits.
Illegal block. Return team.
So the decision has been made, and the coach will take the penalty. Handoff from the shotgun. He's going to lose a yard on that one. The Rams moving quickly to the line.
Nice job by this defense creating that negative play. That's what all defenses want to do. But look at this. This offense, they ain't scared. Right back on the ball, ready to run another play, ready to make this defense work.
You make up the game plan and not a lot on the play sheet for this. 3rd and long from inside their own 20. From the gun, wants to pass. He lobs one high down the left side. It's caught. Off and running. The tag. And he just kept running, and he ran away from the crowd, and he'll take it in. Touchdown, Colorado State. No midseason concentration laps here in Week 7 as they push out that lead.
A lot of times you see those receivers, as soon as they get by the DBs, you know, that hand goes straight up in the air. I got him. I got to step on him. He got to step on him. And the ball is thrown perfectly out in front. You can see he runs underneath it, gets it, and gets the long touchdown on the go route.
They'll try to tack one more on their score. And the extra point is true, and the lead balloons to 21. Man down on the play as the officials take a break to let him be checked out. Kickoff unit getting some extra work as this lead has really grown. And it'll be a touchback. The ball will come out to the 25-yard line. Here comes the Fresno State offense onto the field. They're looking at a 21-point hole. There's still time to turning it on. Got the first down and more. And he's brought down after a nice game. It's 1st and 10 from the 38-yard line. They go to the draw. A confident, tough, efficient run gets it up to the 44. And the Bulldogs with a 2nd and short to keep this drive moving. Touch pass on the jet sweep. He's really close to that first down marker, but they stop him just a bit short. 3rd down, and this offense is already in a world of trouble. They could really use a conversion, not to mention multiple scores. They run him out of bounds. He gets it to the 47. Fresno State moving it quickly down the field. They'll run it out of the shotgun. They pick up half of it. It'll be 2nd and 5. Kept it on the ground on 1st down. Now back to the line. Now the play fake. He got his hands on it, but couldn't hold on to it. What a time that would have been for their first pick of the game. They have work in front of them on 3rd and short from the 42. He'll keep it himself. Got enough for the first down and wants more. 3rd down conversions are huge, and they've got one, and they're at the 35. Looks as if we have an injury on that last play, and we'll take a break to check him out. The Bulldogs kept this drive moving on the ground, now back to work. Looking to throw on 1st down. Moving out of the pocket. Across the 25, he's got room. And he gets out of there and gets some yardage and gets down without taking any punishment.
These quarterbacks are nightmares to play. Pretty good coverage on the outside. Man-to-man, nobody looking at the quarterback. He takes off. He doesn't look like a quarterback. Looks like a running back. Chews up yards, gets way down the field, and makes a big play for this offense.
Going to work in the red zone. They can't pick up the first down without getting it into the end zone. They'll run play action. Got out of trouble, got rid of it. Grabbed in the middle. It's Silver. Can't quite cross the plane to get the 6, but they'll have the first down. Trying to slam in. And he takes it in for the score. Touchdown, Bulldogs. Sometimes we ask coaches about halftime adjustments, and they go blah, 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 blah. And then sometimes they make some good ones.
Sometimes that blah, 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 blah actually works, but it's working now. But it might be too little too late, but at least you got the party started.
He'll try to tack on one more. Right down the boulevard. And for a quick update, let's go to Kevin Connors in the studio.
Fellas, take a peek at what's happening in this interesting battle in the MAC. Ball State is currently ahead in this one, but let's remember, this program has just one bowl win all time, so nothing is a given in Muncie. They're up by a field goal over Northern Illinois. The MACtion never sleeps, and we'll circle back. If anything big happens, you should know about.
Thanks for the update on that one, Kevin. Let us know when it goes final. Rides to back and leaves it. He gets it past the 25-yard line and finally knocked out of bounds at the 27. Man down on the play as the officials take a break to let him be checked out. And the Rams can play this second down a lot of ways with just a few yards to go. Back to pass. Got his man. Really nice pickup there as they have it out to the 44 with a first down. The Rams come to the line in the hurry-up.
Well, he's putting up big numbers coming into this one. We knew the quarterback was going to go his way early and often, and with that last catch, he's now got over 500 yards receiving on the year.
Looking to throw on first down. Complete. Still on his feet at the 45. Taken out of bounds after a good pickup there. They're in striking distance at the 37.
The defense has got to be able to make a play at some point here in the second half. You're down 2 possessions. You need to steal a possession badly. You need to have a takeaway. The coverage is going to have to be way tighter than on that last throw. Otherwise, this offense is just going to go up and down the field.
And you want to talk about his favorite receiver, it might be everybody based on the number of guys getting touches and a chance to show off their hands in the passing game. One more period to go and we'll see just how much fight they've got left in them. They had a chance to mull things over, and let's see how they start. And the Rams come to the line on 3rd and short, trying to keep the drive alive. Sends it back in motion. Wants to throw on 3rd down. Quickly complete. Offenses gain momentum with 3rd down conversions like that. They've got it at the 25.
And they found the big fella again. And they found him early and often today. They featured him here in the 4th quarter. Still time left in this football game. I imagine he's going to still continue to...
Breaks into the open. Nice pitch and catch there, and they'll have enough for the first down. The Rams had tough field position to start this drive, but they've been relentless in moving the ball methodically down the field. They'll move the wide receiver with the run on 1st and goal. And he never had a chance, just stopped cold as soon as he got it.
It's now 2nd and goal.
He'll run it up the middle, trying to pick his way to the end zone. They'll wrestle him down at the 4-yard line after that run. They worked it down to the 4-yard line, but now it's 3rd and goal. From the gun, wants to pass. And he makes the grab. And let's hold on just a minute here as the officials are going to have a second look.
Well, on 3rd and short and field goal range, they dial up the pass play. Quarterback was trying to get through his progressions. There was just simply nobody open. Couldn't make an accurate enough throw. Ball falls incomplete. Now setting up a big decision here on 4th down.
And you know the standard is indisputable video evidence, and the officials will change the call. Dead center perfect. And now the lead is extended a little further. Looks as if we have an injury on that last play, and we'll take a break to check him out.
How great is it to know that if you can get the ball down somewhere close to the 40-yard line on your opponent's side of the field, you're walking away with at least 3 points because this dude is automatic.
Nice job by the kickoff team. Everybody stayed in their lanes, and they'll stop him at the 16. Fresno State takes over, and the offense will go back to work. How about that blocking up front and that running game last time as they just walked it down for a touchdown, David?
And the big boys up front doing their job. Opening holes, the backs making plays. Everything on the ground on that first drive worked.
And we know that this is the identity this coaching staff wants for this team, right? They want to be the most physical team on the field. Let's see if they can keep it up.
Fires to the big fella. Man down on the play as the officials take a break to let him be checked out. They've got to come up with a big play on this 3rd and long. From the gun, wants to pass. Fires to the wideout. Couldn't quite haul it in. They almost had their first pick here late in the game. Fresno State will have to punt it away. He gets a block. He'll get it up to about the 44-yard line before they slam the brakes on it. Looks as if we have an injury on that last play, and we'll take a break to check him out. Colorado State takes over the Ram. Offense returns to the field. So last time, David, they ate up some clock, ran a bunch of plays, but settled for the field goal.
Yeah, but they're still up, Reese, and I like where I'm at. And if I'm on offense right now, my job is to put another long drive together, eat more clock, and get another score.
Just got to be better in the red zone this time around. When they get down close to the goal line, you need better execution to put a touchdown on the board here.
And maybe he'll get back to the line of scrimmage, but no more than that. And the Rams are in the hurry-up.
Nice job by the defense, just being very sound, understanding what they were seeing, and going and getting it. A lot of times these running backs force missed tackles and make you miss and make big plays. This defense did a good job of not letting that happen.
Back in motion, try to clear the picture. And a missed opportunity on 3rd down as the defense knocks it free, and 4th down is coming up. So here comes the field goal unit again. This kicker has already made 3 in this one. Right down the boulevard. It's good. And now the lead is even bigger.
And they just tack on more points to this big lead. Listen, 4th quarter was sitting extremely pretty. All we got to do, not give up big plays, make them earn everything they get the rest this way, and we looking pretty good.
On the move from inside his 5. He was looking for some running room, but not much to be found as he stopped at the 18. Here comes the Fresno State offense onto the field. They go to the ground. And the defense holds firm. No pickup at all on that play. Didn't get much done on that first play of the drive. It's 2nd and 11. Rushes on him. 1st down and more. A really nice run and gain, and he gets down to avoid taking punishment.
Well, you just get the feeling, too, that if they're going to claw their way back in this game, his legs are going to have to be a factor. What a great job scrambling that time. Nothing open. He didn't panic. He saw some green grass. He was able to get outside, away from the defense, get up.
Oh, he just handled it poorly, and it's a fumble. Oh, unfortunate to get that one back, and as an added bonus, they get the 1st down. Just when they're looking run, now up top.
Holding. Offense.
So the penalty will not be enforced. The defense declines and stands on the result of the play. Wants to fire on 2nd down. Short throw to the sideline is complete, and he's out of bounds. He'll be short of the 1st down. It'll be 3rd and long. From the gun, wants to pass. He lofts one down the sideline. And the DB making a huge play, knocking it away downfield. Down by multiple possessions, you can't come up empty on this drive. They'll go for it on 4th down. Under fire. Trying to make magic on the scramble. Just what this offense was looking for. Sets him up at the 26 with the 1st down. And the Bulldogs in the hurry-up.
This is the most annoying thing in the world for a defense, is when you start to play all these plays.
Lets it fly deep downfield. And incomplete on the deep ball. They're dealing with a 2nd and long. Handoff from the gun. Stop is made, but he picks up 4 yards down to the 21-yard line. Man down on the play as the officials take a break to let him be checked out. Already in chip shot field goal range at the 21, but this 3rd and short, they're still thinking touchdown. Wants to go up top. Quickly out on the screen to the wide receiver. Absolutely nowhere to go as this defense makes a 3rd down stop. They're throwing for it on 4th down. Converts on 4th down, and he's still going. He's brought down, but there's a flag on the play. Let's see if it stands.
Holding. Offense.
They'll back him up with a holding penalty this time. They've spent most of the day backing them up with sacks anyway. On 4th down, they'll throw for it. A shot toward the end zone. Can't complete the long throw, and the defense gets off the field on 4th down. They'll try to keep this clock moving on the ground. Got the 1st down and more. Getting up close to midfield. Gets it to the 48-yard line before being run out of bounds. Leaves it with the running back. Quick spin on the ride.
Yeah, it's make or break time for this defense now. They got to get a stop, and if that's bringing more bodies in, bringing more beef in, they're running the football right up the gut, right at you. They're not going to throw the football in this situation. Time to be more physical and get this big stop.
Got it behind the line. It's Morton. And just a short, safe pass play. They pick up a few. Clock stops. We have reached the 2-minute timeout, and this offense just a couple of minutes away from putting one in the win column. A quick completion to the left, looking for the 1st down. They are on the move down to the 32, and they pick up another 1st down. Quick release by the QB. They make the stop, trying to pick up just a little bit at a time to get to that 1st down marker. The Rams can really attack on this 2nd and short. Motion from the wideout. They'll go to the jet sweep to try to get the edge here. And this one will be stopped for no gain. With the clock running, this should be the final play. They get the win. They are now bowl eligible, but when you have a 0 in the loss column, there are much bigger fish to fry.
I think a lot of people thought they'd be 6-0 at this point, too. So we know they're going to a bowl game. Great. But, David, they've got their eyes set on the college football playoff and a national championship. They have that kind of talent. They're not surprised they're 6-0. They're looking to do bigger things.
No, 6-0 is great, but that's not the goal. They want to be 12-0. They want to be 14-0. They want to continue this streak as long as they possibly can. Extremely talented. Nobody's surprised, and their goals are a lot bigger than this.
That's going to do it from here. For David Pollack and Jesse Palmer, I'm Reese Davis, and you've been watching another presentation of EA Sports College Football.